All right. Hello, everybody. Happy June, if you can believe it. It's so nice to have you here today. So if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, my name is Ren Lovegood. I am the Senior Manager of the Leadership Excellence Networks. I'm glad you're here. I think we mostly have familiar faces on. I am just going to do some housekeeping items really quickly so that then we can get into kind of the bulk of our decision making and discussion processes for the day. One quick ask of you. We held our first joint event between our graduate education health management group, which we call GEM, which is kind of the academic arena of our NCHL program. But we did our first ever event with them called Bridging Academia and Industry in May. And we'd love to know if you did attend, would love more feedback from Lens. If you did not attend, would also love your feedback on it. I think some of the primary feedback we got was just that a 3-hour event was just too much to be able to make it to, and that it conflicted too much with people's schedules. So we're considering other ways that we can potentially collaborate with that group in the future or bring in joint learnings and opportunities there. Oh, sorry. So if you have a chance, I'll put it in the chat once we get started with our discussions. Some exciting things that are coming up. So for those of you who have previously participated in our survey that we do every 2 years, that's called the National Healthcare Leadership Survey, and it results in the Best Organizations for Leadership Development Award. We've been running this survey since at least 2007, but it's run on an every other year basis. This year is an off year. And so what we decided to do for the first time as a team was go through these years of data that's been collected across these leadership dimensions and try to find some potential correlations between high performance in specific dimensions on the survey, and also just to start highlighting some of the best practices or organizational and program components for participants who were especially high performing in certain areas. And so there's going to be a report released in the coming days, I think, for our Q1, where we interviewed 2 organizations that were high performing in 3 of those leadership domains that, based on the data that we've collected, seem to correlate with one another. We'll be releasing another kind of Q2 report specifically on coaching, providing performance feedback, and monitoring and achieving results. But in addition to the report that we'll release, we're also hosting a live webinar. So Corey Colton from Carilion Clinic is going to be moderating that. And we have a leader from Intermountain Health, a leader from Carilion Clinic, and a leader from MD Anderson, who are going to be joining us for that panel to talk more specifically about the practices of their coaching programs. There are some really interesting kind of synergies across, and there are different levels of maturity in how developed these programs have been, but they were identified as being high performing across those 3 domains and seem to share a lot of similar best practices when it comes to what they are implementing for coaching programs and how they incorporate those other 2 dimensions into it. So I will also put that into the chat. It will be recorded. So if the time doesn't work for you, you can still sign up if you're interested in watching it at a later date, and that recording will get sent out to you. Next item, we are moving, or we just closed, I think, our submissions for all member conference content. So we're working on looking through and evaluating that. A goal for us this year for our all member conference is to increase the number of sessions and the type of content that's offered. So we're looking at not just hosting typical kind of breakout sessions, but also learning labs or kind of longer intensives on deep dives into subjects that are relevant to our Lens members. So that's very exciting. We're looking forward to opening registration for that all member conference on the 27th of this month. Just as a reminder for those of you who are here, depending on which tier of membership your organization is currently involved in, you do get a certain number of complimentary registrations to attend conference. And so those will be going out to program leads or our primary contacts for our program memberships on the 27th as well. If you have any questions, if you don't know who your primary contact is and you want to make sure you can try to save a ticket or ask if one can be allocated to you, just reach out and let me know. I'll make sure that I put you in touch with the right person. Additionally, if your team is looking to send kind of a larger group together, we're happy to invoice if the organization is going to help assist in those discounted registrations to send additional participants. We've had some teams send pretty large delegations in the past, and we're happy to help facilitate that. So if that's of interest, please let me know as well. Should you need it, there's also just a quick program overview, kind of an orientation recording, as well as a demo to our member portal. And so I will pause and see if there's any questions.
No questions, Ren. I have a comment though. I recently engaged with Cody earlier this week, so I am so pleased he's going to be a part of the panel. Absolutely amazing experience. So I cannot wait for that.
Oh, I love to hear that. Thank you so much. All right. Well, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We're going to start with just a couple of discussion topics. And then I have just kind of some brainstorming questions for you pertaining to creating a training repository. So the discussion topics for this week, something I've heard a lot when we're talking about leadership competencies is like, are the leadership competencies that are used currently, are they shifting? Is leadership style changing in terms of what we value as being the most important components of leadership, or what makes a good leader? And are you recognizing in your own organizations that the types of leaders you want to develop has changed at all? And if so, how are you kind of working through integrating opportunities to train leaders in developing competencies in those different leadership styles?
This is Alicia at Medical University of South Carolina. It's good to see everybody. I think that we actually have a push on developing situational leadership. And so by that, what we're doing is a lot of our programs, both an emerging leaders program and advanced leadership program, help the leader to identify their go-to style and then identify other styles and situations where other styles might be appropriate. And we're here on the coast of South Carolina. So one of the things we talk about, one of the examples is when a hurricane is off the coast, you go directly to an authoritarian leadership style, right? But then when you're trying to collaborate on a new service line, that requires a whole different style. So knowing the style that they most identify with and then being able to shift as the situation calls for it is sort of where we are at the moment.
You know, just to add to that on situational leadership, for the last 5 or so years, we have really engaged with Tilt 360 in our organization, which is kind of a character, identifying those character strengths. But the idea is that situational, adaptive, understanding where you tilt, where does your team tilt, and how do we tilt together to adapt to a rapidly changing environment. So kind of similar to that, but we've really been on an intentional journey of that for the last 5 years. We do have a new CEO, so I'll be curious how some of the desires and shifts, but it's been a great tool as somebody, now that I'm in this part of the organization, supporting the organization. When I was a leader out there being the consumer of leadership development, it was really valuable. So we've really been trying to focus on that situational leadership piece, and helping people tilt and adapt to different situational needs.
I'll add, this is Justine Mishik from University of Minnesota Academic Programs with MHA. This is great to hear as we've framed our leadership course around situational leadership, and that leadership's a practice, it's intentional, it's ongoing, that you might have develop a propensity towards one style. However, the lens that we're teaching it through is situational leadership. So great to hear this. Because I think one question early careerists have is like, should I be picking one leadership philosophy over another? And perhaps that doesn't develop the holistic leaders that we would imagine or that we would seek to have in our organizations.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, Justine. We teach situational leadership for our first-time people leaders. So anyone who's new to leadership, that's the approach we teach. But then as people progress through our curriculum, we move more into our competency-based, leadership competency-based work. We are looking at evolving our leadership competencies a little bit right now. We've had a model that we've developed. It's very aligned with the NCHL model, but we've used the same model since 2015 and have noticed some things that either are shifting or that we want to intentionally shift, where some things are not as clear or overt in those competencies in that model that as we would like them to be. So primarily for us, it's looking for really an expectation of leaders' involvement in the well-being of their teams. So that's something that has definitely changed, we think, throughout the past 3 or 4 years, that we do need to overtly hold leaders accountable for that and prepare them for it. We want to change the way we talk about lean. It's the language we've been using is a little outdated, doesn't really feel current or relevant. We also want inclusion to be a more clear and overt expectation. It is one of our values, but it's not as explicit in our leadership competency model as we feel like it needs to be.
Yeah, this is Kathy from Norton Healthcare, and we are leaning on strengths, specifically Gallup Strengths Finders, as a way for leaders to really embody those things that make them unique and what they can bring as a leader that's different from what someone else can bring as a leader. And then to also recognize the strengths of those on their team and how do we get people working in their strength zone most of the time, because the research shows that then they're more engaged and productive. We're also really weighing heavily on our learning and development team to bring a trauma-informed care lens as well as implicit bias. So those are 2 trainings that we are becoming certified in as a learning and development team that will then hopefully disperse throughout the rest of the organization.
Hi, this is Cindy Zito from Henry Ford Health. And what we were doing, we spent some time with looking at and developing competencies right kind of during COVID. And we've kind of pushed that on the back burner right now because we got a lot of pushbacks from leaders saying, boy, there's just so much going on and so much that, we're expected to do, because we've used, strengths before, and we've used really DISC was important for us. And now we're kind of vacillating, and we're talking about maybe instead of really bringing out and having set competencies, is just to really lean into our leadership principles that we created and really kind of focus in on what the core values that we have, the leadership principles, so that we don't feel like leaders are like, okay, there's 100 different things that we have to do and none of them's really important. So that's kind of what we're thinking and discussing right now.
Cindy, how do the leadership principles differ from competencies?
And I guess that's where, with the leadership principles, some of them we had, and I've got some of the sheets, like encouraging innovation and curiosity is one of our principles. Acting with courage, demonstrating integrity and trustworthiness, championing diversity, owning safety and reliability, communicating with empathy and transparency, and the last one was ensuring outcomes and accountability. So, I mean, they really do kind of, tie into that. We were thinking about with those principles is, maybe specific behaviors. So yeah, it's kind of challenging, I guess, to think of what can we do as a overall, where so many different departments need different kind of competencies. And I think that's where we got into before, it was like, we tried to have basic competencies, but then it was like, well, this area, this department needed, a whole other set. So then it was like, are we adding that on top of our basics for the whole health system? And that's why we took a step back and said, all right, this is getting too unwieldy. And we really want to keep it to where's those core competencies that are really needing the focus.
This is Amy from Springfield Memorial. Just coming off of Cynthia's comment, we too have, a lot of leadership competencies. And so we have a 3-year strategic plan called Destination 2025. And as we are trying to move our organization forward, we've identified 8 of our focused competencies truly to be that if we're going to make our mark by 2025, we need all of our leaders to work towards those 8 core competencies to help us get there. The other thing with our leadership competencies is we very much needed to revamp from the lens of inclusion. So equity, diversity, inclusion, and we've really just stood up this function within the past 2 years or so. So we're in the process now of going through every competency, rewriting through that lens, which is quite a lot.
And this is Tara from Curlian Clinic, and I'll just jump onto those comments from Cynthia and Amy, because interesting about Cynthia's comment, because we sort of went back to what are the core values for the organization. So I think we were always a group who taught servant leadership. So we have a lot of that out there, less situational. And I think that has served us well. But I think in the coming months, because we have so much to overcome in terms of, financial issues, and then we're going to be implementing a new ERP. So we've tried to step back from leaders and giving them so much. And we've decided to focus on their change management skills and then their financial acumen. So we also use the NCHL competencies, but we're sort of taking a step back from that, trying to focus on the core values of the organization and frame our leadership with that, like courage and curiosity. The other thing I'll say about it, and I don't know if the group is thinking about this, but the other thing we're doing is we're a little bit worried about attracting new leaders. We don't think that some of the current model, like unit directors being in charge of nursing units 24/7, so we're stepping back a bit from that model. We put team leaders in place, but also what we call operational leaders that are available. They work 8-hour shifts, and then you have a unit director on top of that, and then more senior directors, just to help shore up sort of the structure to give more support.
Kind of on that topic, this is Jennifer from Johns Hopkins. One of our nursing departments decided to pilot a structure where they have 2 nurse managers leading one unit of like probably 200 plus people, just to see if that would work. They were both kind of part-time, right? And just kind of really put together a structure around who was in charge of what and when. And it seemed to work really well. So that the Department of Nursing is really kind of thinking about, do we do more of that? So just to kind of get to, it is a lot for one person to manage, 24/7, 365, all of that. So, yeah, I thought that was a creative approach.
We're doing something similar at Norton Healthcare. Not the part-time approach for our nursing managers, but we are having a day shift nurse manager and a night shift nurse manager, and it's being trialed in our NICU currently. There are over 300 employees in this one NICU. So as you can imagine, it's not feasible for one person to manage 300 people in the way in which we ask them to do it. So we're hoping that this day shift, night shift manager will help ease the burden on the one manager, but also give staff the support that they are asking for. I'll also add that NICU night shift manager position was open for over 6. I think it was closer to. Didn't get anybody interested in the.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but I caught about every other word that Casey just shared.
Casey, I heard some of it in terms of that position was open for quite some time, like maybe 6 to 8 months. It was a really tough position to fill, which I think we've heard a lot from our TMAP participants as well.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was a NICU. It was a NICU. Is this better? Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, it was a NICU nurse manager, and I'll just repeat because I don't know what you heard and what you didn't hear, but this unit has over 300 employees, and one nurse manager could not be responsible for over 300 employees and also assume 24/7 responsibility. So we split the position into day shift and night shift, 5 8-hour shifts. And we even offered flexibility on the night shift position. So if it made more sense for them, whoever moved into that role, to work 3/12s or to work 4/10s or to work 5/8s in order to fill the need, we were offering that flexibility. But the position was open for closer to 8 or 9 months because we couldn't get anyone interested in that position.
So Casey, I'm curious, and for those of you that are trying kind of the co-management, is that in addition to like shift charge nurse type roles as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So actually in the NICU, they have 2 different charge nurses on day shift and 2 different charge nurses at the same time on night shift. And then they also have the manager, and at times, not around the clock, but at times they have an assistant nurse manager. And then there's a nursing director also.
Yeah. Similarly, we have, there is a nursing director over a particular department, but then we have lead clinical nurses. So who kind of function as supervisors, so to speak, for a particular, well, they're always in that role, and it's both administrative as well as still clinical to some regards. And then we have, the different levels of nurses as well to be able to help out, and mentors that rotate amongst different units.
I think one of the issues we've run into also is that our supervisors and assistant nurse managers and charge nurses are paid hourly, and our nurse managers are salary. And it doesn't make sense for them to increase their level of responsibility and potentially decrease their pay.
We have another level too. We call it a nurse practice facilitator, but somebody who wholly looks at the orientation and onboarding of new employees to make sure they successfully transition into nursing practice. So we have that level as well, in addition to the charge nurses, the operational managers, the directors. Yeah.
Can you repeat what that position's called?
It's the nurse practice facilitator, and it really just facilitates them into nursing practice. So we're finding, they're pretty young. We're hiring a lot of new grads where we normally would not have hired new grads. And so they just facilitate their orientation. So they give the feedback, they connect with the unit director, make sure they transition into practice.
Tara, those are
Thank you.
not in your organization, they're in the nursing organization.
They are
Okay.
in the nursing organization. Yep. But we've
Kim,
had a discussion about that, Alice.
Yeah.
Where should they be?
Yeah, Kim, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that's we have not the same, but a similar thing where quite a bit of it is in our learning organization, and there's a constant push-pull of should it be in learning, should it be in nursing? And you go, Kim.
And we just recently stood up the Ohio Health Nurse Residency Program, which is a year-long program. And our nurse resident managers are responsible for the initial onboarding of all of our new grads entering into that space, which can span anywhere to 8 to 12 weeks. And then after that, they transition to nurse advisors who are on the nursing team to conduct monthly seminars and surveys to stay in touch with them regarding the time to practice and the competencies, making sure that those are shored up for that. And that goes on for a year. And then the next plan is to have a nurse resident mentoring program for the second year. So the seminar, the monthly seminar portion, the touch base points regarding competency readiness takes place in the nursing unit, and the orientation portion takes place in the learning space, which is not aimed to provide specific skill sets that you would receive in nursing school. So there's a lot that goes into that space because, as you all probably have experienced, new grads who have matriculated into that space over the last 3 years did not have the same experience, practice experience as others did prior to that. So we are really looking at where does even it reside to offer refreshers, to offer that in-person practice that was not received during nursing school. Where does that sit? Where does that reside? In learning or in nursing? So there's lots of conversation that keeps occurring in those spaces. So it sounds like that nurse facilitator role is quite interesting, the nurse practice facilitator role.
But it has, like you brought up, many conversations about where it should reside. And we're trying to figure out, should nursing have that role? And then we have a role that's above that, that would be more like an educator who would oversee, not oversee, but matrix back to those transition to practice facilitators for several units. And then that's the feedback that comes back to learning. So it's interesting. I'm curious to know if anybody else is doing this work and has a great model for it.
Yes, I would as well. Our nurse educators, we have that role also, report in nursing.
And it is interesting because it's such a moment in time, I think most of our organizations had this figured out pre-pandemic, but the high volume of new nurses with that different nursing school experience, it's just like, I think we're all kind of making it up. What we know is that we can't keep doing what we did 3 years ago. So, and I know that we've drifted pretty far from our original topic, but I also know we all have nurses. Anybody else have something that they're trying or succeeding with in this space?
Well, speaking of the nursing space, we are just starting the journey of looking at nurse leader development as its own, how can we support nurse leader development? Because we have lots of different programs and cohort programs, but specific to addressing the challenges that nurse leaders face. And so we are recognizing that and have it on our roadmap. There's, I just wanted to appreciate back to the original question about competencies and leadership styles and what are we enabling. And we have 4 leadership behaviors: mission obsessed, empower each other, drive results, and act with courage. And then we have some more specific behaviors underneath that, and some of this is addressed by our training and our programs and leadership development, and some of it is addressed through actually operationalizing different processes in the organization that help enable that. So for example, empower each other. We want our leaders to connect with empathy and build trust and coach and develop others. And we've enabled that by moving, from an annual review process to a more frequent check-in process that, puts a system in place for leaders to have those conversations and document them in our workday, and really help enable supporting people in development and growth conversations as well. So, some of it comes with training, and then some of it is in partnering with how do we create this as part of our ongoing culture, so that it's not just a new competency I have to learn, but then the systems make it easier for me to engage in that work as a leader.
One of the things that we're doing, just for development and going back even with the nursing development, but with all of ours is this fall, we're creating just a group coaching type of mechanism to where we're going to be focusing in on different topics, but then we're segmenting the groups. So we'll have more seasoned leaders, new leaders, mid-level leaders, nurse leaders, so that they're really in a cohort with each other. And so really focusing in on a topic. And each topic will have like two sessions that they come to where they're going to be going in and learning some of the skills, maybe practicing it in that first session. And then they're expected to kind of go out into the field and to practice these, so that when they come back to the second one, they're really going to be talking with their peers about, what worked, what didn't work, some challenges, and then really kind of share some best practices. So that's, I guess, one of the things that
I'm upstairs.
one of the things that we're focusing on. So
That's really helpful, Cynthia. Curious, did you say that was a mix of leadership levels, or the cohort was, managers or directors?
yeah, wonderful. Thanks for letting me clarify. We're going to have the cohort will be specified to either new leaders or to nurse manager leaders or to seasoned. So that way we can kind of tailor the topics based on that. What we're trying to do, because our whole organizational development, department is very lean. And so we're hoping that we can, because we want to be able to offer this throughout the whole system. We've got 33,000 employees. I don't know how many leaders up to now, 5,000 or something. And so we want to be able to try and partner with folks that are really kind of interested in this. They don't want this to be their full-time job, but they want to be able to maybe train, or especially to have nurse managers who are very good. And so we'll have somebody from our department co-facilitate that with a nurse facilitator or a nurse manager, so that we're really kind of getting the best of both worlds, and also maybe helping so that nurse manager gets so comfortable training that she could or he could do it on their own. So I guess that's what we're thinking about, is how can we really share the wealth, but it also is for a learning or leadership development for them to be out there facilitating and helping our next generation of leaders ramp up. So trying to be, I guess, creative of how can we be lean and still be very effective.
Cynthia, I'm curious, how are you identifying the topics? Is it, are you identifying? Is the group that comes together identifying them?
You know, we're going to start with identifying them ourselves, and we've been kind of socializing different topics throughout the system with some of the leaders just to see what's really gravitating towards them. But it's also kind of topics that we know that our system really needs. Change management, emotional intelligence, we always want to be able to increase that. Giving, feedback, diversity, we'll have some aspects into that, and it could be, yeah. So we're fine tuning. We've got several that we've narrowed it down to, and we'll be fine tuning it over the next couple of months. Good question.
Thanks.
One of the other things we had on here, which we can try to touch on quickly if it's of interest, is how is your organization working to cultivate either like a change or a growth mindset in its leaders? Recognizing that healthcare has changed a lot over the last 3 years, and there are many leaders who've been working in healthcare for a very long time. And so how has that been a challenge? Are you finding that there's any resistance to change in the organizations, or are you focusing on any initiatives to like cultivate that kind of growth mindset in your leaders? Or is this not a challenge at all?
I'm just giggling because, oh, we don't ever have resistance to change. Oh, yes. But we've really, we've leaned into Carol Dweck's work for years. We don't actually facilitate the specific content around growth mindset, but it's been a part of the language of the organization for a long time. And I think there are some places where we engage that then from a leadership perspective, and how we have conversations with people, and some of that training, empowering conversations, using a coach approach, because that not only helps us, be forward focused and think about what are the possibilities and kind of that growth mindset. Okay, if not today, I just don't know this yet, and I can learn. And that's really, the culture that the learning organization is committed to fostering. But we continue to draw threads in that through all of our programs and our learning and our leadership development programs. But we don't actually specifically deliver like the growth mindset content, but it gets peppered into our self-created content.
Yeah, and Carol Dweck, I just facilitated something. We've got also an insurance arm that we have, and so they're going through a lot of changes. I mean, we all are, but with that group, it definitely is. And so I just facilitated something with all of the senior leaders. So on the payer side, and then the senior leaders were going to roll it down to the senior leaders were the top of the house, VPs and above. And they were going to be kind of rolling down some of that to their directors, managers, rolling it down to try and create, a little bit more as far as just the focus of that growth mindset, with some of the change initiatives over on the insurance side of it, getting involved with a lot of change management. But yes, change is a big piece component. And so we want to be able to really kind of focus on help support leaders through more change management and really kind of helping them understand the mindset and to be able to change those behaviors so that people are not getting that stuck in that resistance. So we're really kind of heavy working on it on the payer side. But yes, we want to get involved and start to do that more on the health system side, because we have not been really good with change management and really kind of supporting our leaders. And so we want to give more tools to them to help, especially with changes that are going to be coming in the future.
I really appreciate,
Sorry. I was just going to say, I actually think leaders are asking for more of this. I mean, we can't feed them fast enough. They're asking for a lot more change management. They know that it's hard to be a leader and they're trying to consume everything that we have to offer. And we're also looking at change management, hoping to invest with the ProSci ADKAR model and use that through our ERP, put a big investment in our leaders because there are classes you can teach to them. And then forever after, hopefully build their skills, because change happens to them every single day. And they're just, yeah, we've got to build that muscle strength. Sorry, Amy, go ahead.
it'll come back to me.
And Tara, I'm certified in the ProSci. And so it's a very good, really good system. The only thing that I would just have you be aware of is that sometimes leaders or people will get caught up in just the processing of it. And ProSci it's very kind of the strategic about the processes and things. But as we all know, it's the emotional aspect of it and that mindset, and where people can kind of get stuck. And that's, I know some people that have been certified with ProSci kind of get stuck with the processes, and they feel comfortable in that area, and they don't feel so comfortable kind of walking into that messy area of when the emotional component. So just kind of suggestion.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this conversation because we are very change adverse, and there seems like there's change, around every corner. But what I've really picked up from this is the framework of growth mindset, because I think even using just the phrasing of change management turns people off. Because we've been using it for so long and not very well. And so that's definitely something I'm going to look more into, is this growth mindset theme. Thank you.
Sorry. This is a kind of older, so some of you may have heard it before, but Cy Wakeman speaks about change management versus business readiness. And we don't use that at Ohio Health broadly, but I personally use it with my teams that it's really more about, not thinking of change as an episodic thing, but just what does it look like to be ready as a business for whatever is coming, and to have that expectation of it. We do have leading in the gray as one of our leadership competencies. So change management, leading change as a leader, is built into our leadership development work. That being said, we do have change fatigue as one of our top 2 risks in our enterprise risk management survey right now. So just the sense that no matter how well we're doing it, there's simply too much volume of change. And unlike during the pandemic, it's not externally imposed change. A lot of it is internally driven. So we feel pretty good about the development of our managers and directors to be able to lead change. And the place where I have a gap is getting senior leaders to prioritize which changes are worth putting the organization through at any given time. So it's not, we can't just beef up the change management. At some point, we need to say no. Yeah. So saying yes to everything means we don't have a strategy. And that is a little bit how it feels sometimes. So I would be curious if anybody's got best practices at leading up as far as that. We do have a change capacity index that we designed for this purpose, but haven't had a lot of great adoption. So the change management function has a survey that cross-references the Mayo Wellbeing Index, change readiness questions, and stress questions, and overlays that with turnover data. So you can say, let's look at a care site or a business unit, survey them, and then have a good idea of who can take on more change and who can't, and what for the kind of gray area people, how could we help them get more well so that they can take on the change. But the design of that is to tell people, like, maybe you shouldn't do this now, and we just don't have a senior executive appetite around that.
I think we might all relate to that.
I
Always
was
my
curious,
turn, though.
and this is not something that's been actively being used in our organization. So I'm just curious if anyone is using this out there, if anyone's had success with using the polarity approach to continuity and transformation, and walking people through stability and change, or these dynamics where you have two opposing values that are in conflict with each other, kind of dealing with paradox. We're staying the same and we're changing at the same time. So sometimes it gets tricky. So I was just curious if anybody's had any success using that approach in change or in initiatives in their organizations. Oh, thanks, Martina.
Hello. I use it in coaching, in a one-on-one coaching framework. So that's what I learned. I'm an executive coach, and so we do coaching as part of a leadership development program, and sometimes I bring that up if as you mentioned, there are two things that need to coexist. For example, life and career balance, or things like that. And so I use the polarity method successfully. I have not used it in class, like in a classroom setting, but it's actually one of my favorite things. Whenever I hear a polarity, I'm always like, oh, great. and it's received very well. So I'd be happy to connect if you have some questions to exchange.
Yeah, thank you, Martina. I have a certification in it. I did it before I came into this space, so I use it in coaching and kind of outside of the organization, and have found success with it, like you described, and I know it has potential in team, in working through change with people, but I just haven't seen it actively used, and so I was curious what others' experiences might be with it. So Amy, I'll put the name of that in the chat too. Thanks, Martina.
Thank you.
Well, great dialogue. Ren, do you want to move on to any of the other, we've got about 8 minutes left. Anything else on our agenda?
Yes, so I'm just going to share my screen. I think what makes the most sense just based on the timing. So I'd like to just introduce some of these questions, see if maybe I'm missing anything, and then potentially I can just send out a short survey to kind of gather some data before we meet again in July. We've talked a bit about this, about an idea of kind of creating a repository of training resources as kind of a Lens community. I don't know that I would close this off to just leadership development. I think I'd love to be able to open it up to like the broader Lens community and see if there are ways in which we can assist one another, recognizing that there's a lot between us collectively. There's a lot of trainings and resources for learning and development that have been created by our organizations. And that right now, I think, as was mentioned earlier on the call, financial restraints are a major challenge in terms of identifying, which trainings you can create right now, what you can focus on if you don't already have it in-house. So the idea behind this is that we would create kind of a repository where organizations who are Lens members would have access to it under the proposed requirements right now. And this is still being flushed out, something we've never done before. It would include that you would have to contribute to that repository in order to gain access to it. That we would be asking you to submit all of the materials, whether it's scripts, worksheets, recordings, pre or post testing that were created for that training. And essentially, providing everything that an organization would need to kind of scale it internally or adapt it and be able to provide it internally in the same way that you are currently offering it at your institution. And that it's something that you have the full rights over. So we know that if you've brought in an outside consultant, there may be rules or regulations around how you can share those materials. So it would have to be something that you have the right to share with us or with the Lens community. And so by sharing it, you would be giving permission to the other Lens member organizations to modify it and use those resources within their own organization. And then we would be asking that outside of using it in your institution as a Lens organization, that you not share it with non-Lens members, just out of respect for privacy and for those who are having access to it and have provided those trainings to then get access to trainings. We're still flushing this out, but I think the idea is creating an online Dropbox or something even on our internal M365 if we can, where individuals can just upload these training materials. And I think that would start with first, whether or not individuals are actually interested in this, if this is something that seems feasible, recognizing the other things that are on your plates right now and how many loads you all are carrying as leaders in your institutions, whether or not you can identify, thinking off the top of your head, trainings that you think you could already say, this is a high value training. It could easily be adapted. The resources are easy to use. I'd be happy to, to share them, figuring out what it is that we have or what organizations say right off the bat, oh yeah, I can share something on this topic. And also then identifying what your needs are that are unmet right now. I know I heard somebody, I think, say implicit bias or a couple of other trainings that they're looking at and trying to figure out how to implement right now. So the hope would be that we can both identify where there's unmet needs for Lens members and where other Lens members may have already met that need in their own institution and be able to share those resources to lighten the load. and I threw a lot at you. We only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to see if there's questions, but then my thought would be to send out kind of a pulse survey, a short survey to see if we can gain a little more information into what this might look like, what might be available, and what we can do moving forward.
I think a survey would be great, Ren. So thanks for thinking of doing that.
Sure. And I'll make sure this gets sent out with the materials for today's call, and the notes for today's call. And I will work on just creating a short and simple pulse survey to kind of get a little more feedback on what this might look like, if there are trainings that you already have identified you might be able to share or can think of off the top of your head, as well as if you can identify where there are currently unmet needs for your training at your organization that we might be able to target asks for. But if you have questions or would like to connect in between now and then, or have any ideas, please shoot them right over my way. I know we're right up at time. Megan is going to be leading our July 13th meeting. I will be out of the office, but I will make sure that all those materials are out to you, and please don't hesitate to contact me at any point. But if there's any questions, I can stay on a couple minutes longer, but otherwise I know we're right at time.
Thank you. This has been
Thanks
so
so
helpful
much.
today.
Yeah.
Good to see
Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks,
You
Alex.
all
and
have a
Ren.
beautiful afternoon.
You too.